$1,000 was all it took for a woman's life to collapse into ruins and for an agent's career to turn to ashes. Petty greed sparked a chain of events that burned everything around it. The insurance adjuster. The scorching Phoenix air shimmered above the asphalt as Paul walked once again into the insurance office. The place always smelled of cheap coffee and printouts, and the glow of old fluorescent lights made every face look equally tired. He was used to the routine: reports, calls, clients with the same complaints. The job wasn't glamorous, but it gave him steady pay and the promise of bonuses if he could save company money. That day, a new client was assigned to him, a woman in her 40s named Helen. She looked worn out, dark circles under her eyes, trembling hands, as if she had already heard too many refusals. Her case was ordinary: a minor parking lot accident, dented bumper, broken headlight, nothing serious. All Helen wanted was to get her car back in working order so she could keep going to work. Paul flipped through the papers, glanced at the photos, and quickly realized he could trim the report. The repair would cost much more, but if he wrote a smaller figure, the company would be pleased. The $1,000 difference would reach him indirectly through performance bonuses. Someone else's misfortune turned into his little victory. He said, "You're in luck," with his standard smile. "The damage is minor. The company will cover the costs." Helen nodded with relief, though doubt flickered in her eyes. Even she felt the payout looked too small. But she didn't dare argue with the agent. Papers were signed, the case closed. Back at his desk, Paul ticked the box in the file and felt a strange satisfaction. Just $1,000, and his supervisors would mark him as efficient. He even imagined himself at the bar at month's end, toasting to his success. He didn't know, and didn't want to know, that this little saving would trigger a chain of events that would crush not only Helen, but him as well. In Phoenix, nothing burns more reliably than the consequences of petty greed. Helen drove to a repair shop on the outskirts of Phoenix, where the smell of gasoline hung heavy in the blistering air. Her car's AC had died in the peak of July, and the engine overheated daily, reminding her that heat could break as efficiently as accidents. The mechanic, a wiry old man in a baseball cap, studied the engine and clicked his tongue. "I can put in a new cooling system," he said, "but it's expensive." Then he looked at her with desert wisdom. "Or stick a piece of cardboard in front of the radiator. Sometimes works." Helen stared at the figures in his estimate, twice the amount Paul had listed. The silence stretched while the ceiling fan lazily stirred hot air. She tried other shops, but the answer was the same: too high. Each time she heard the same line: "With these papers, we can't help you." At the third place, the clerk even joked she should try the lottery. The bank was no better. She signed loan papers under a poster that read, "Your Vegas dream just one step away." Once she had saved for that trip. Now the irony stung. Signing debt under a stranger's dream felt like a final reminder her own life was sliding downward. Debt grew faster than her salary. She cut expenses, dropped small pleasures, took extra shifts, but all of it vanished into the bank. The car kept breaking, and the AC stayed dead. She rode the bus, losing an hour each way. Her boss frowned at her lateness. Colleagues stopped offering rides. When the bank finally repossessed her car, she didn't cry. She just sat in her empty apartment, staring at the insurance paperwork that hadn't even covered the price of cardboard for the radiator. Helen met her brother in a small cafe where the AC had given up long ago. An old fan at the counter blew napkins and half our words across the room. They kept asking each other to repeat, as if they were discussing pancake recipes, not a lawsuit. "So, how much did they give you?" David leaned closer. "Less than half," she shouted over the fan. "What? Half? Less!" she nearly yelled. A few customers turned their heads. David spread the papers across the sticky table. His eyes narrowed when he saw the line about a secondary inspection. The date fell on a Sunday, marked in red on the calendar. "They inspected your car on a Sunday, at noon, when the office is closed?" He smirked and leaned back. Helen watched him. His anger wasn't just for her. "That company once did this to me, too," he said flatly, as if confessing something minor. "I was a young lawyer. They slashed my client's payout. I couldn't prove it. Been waiting ever since." She clenched her hands. "And now?" he said. "We sue." "That's expensive." "Cheaper than silence." They fell quiet. The fan squeaked like an old wardrobe. Helen thought of debts and sleepless nights. David thought of his chance at payback. In the corner, someone dropped a glass. Soda spread across the sticky floor. Helen watched the waitress mop it up with weary indifference and thought, maybe this is what fighting the system looks like. Messy, thankless, but necessary. Paul stared at the lawsuit notice, frozen. His name sat clearly in the defendant field. He reopened old reports and knew he would have to erase his tracks. That night, the office was empty. The lights flickered to save power. The AC wheezed and died, leaving thick heat behind. Paul cracked open a can of Monsoon Max beside his keyboard and immediately spilled half onto the keys. The screen flickered, and the report filled with stray characters. QQQ, Max for life. He cursed, wiped it off, and kept working. He edited the car photos, stamping new metadata, but the windshield reflected the office clock. Its time clashed with the report date. Paul shrugged. Nobody will notice. The door banged. A security guard peeked in, fanning himself with brochures. "Hot in here," he said, handing Paul one. "No thanks," Paul muttered. Back to work, fake secondary inspections, copied signatures, shifted dates. At one point, the printer jammed, streaking black lines across a page. He crumpled it, tossed it into an overflowing bin. No grand thoughts, just numbers moved, lines erased, everything neat and tidy. On his way out, he glanced at the water cooler. It was boiling like a kettle. He adjusted his tie and left, confident the documents were ready. But the system already held screenshots of the originals, and someone else was staying late, watching too. The office didn't smell of AC anymore, but of fish. Richard microwaved something pungent daily, and half the staff fled to the stairwell. He loved the word compliance and dropped it into every conversation, even about parking or lunch lines. Office supplies, pens, staplers, always seemed to migrate to his desk. Richard had been watching Paul. The rise was too fast, the reports too clean. When client complaints surfaced, he saw his chance. After hours, he copied the files from the printer, typed a report in Comic Sans, and stuffed it in an envelope. Grease stains from his dinner, mackerel in oil, stayed on the page. He didn't bother changing it. At the morning meeting, the AC faltered again. Donuts melted on paper plates. The manager tried slogans about optimization and team spirit, but his words sagged in the heavy air. Paul sat opposite, feeling the weight of glances. Short, quiet, knowing. He fiddled with his car keys, their jingle betraying his nerves. Richard leaned close and whispered as if about the weather. "All good?" Paul turned. "If it helps you sleep." The rest of the meeting passed in silence, only the cooler burbling lukewarm water. Richard smiled in the hallway as though nothing had happened, but the compliance office already had his greasy Comic Sans envelope. The Phoenix courtroom was stifling despite the loud hum of AC. The bailiff handed out makeshift fans, old photocopies. People waved them absently, half listening. Helen sat beside David, composed but tired. He tapped his pen on the table, face calm, almost indifferent. The mechanics testified first. Repairs cost twice the payout. Then David laid out the evidence, plain and short. Here's the inspection date, Sunday, an official holiday. Here are screenshots of the original files. Here are the photo metadata. Timestamps don't match. Each point was matter-of-fact, like a grocery list. The judge nodded, noting it down. Paul tried to argue, but his words drowned in the AC's roar. During recess, he went to the soda machine, fed in $1. The machine ate it, blinked, froze. He shook it until a can dropped, straight into the hands of a man in a suit beside him. The man walked away without a word. Paul was left empty-handed. When court resumed, the company lawyer mumbled about system optimization, but never touched the substance. David added a few more dry sentences. It was enough. The judge set down his papers. Claim granted. Full payout. Agent found guilty of falsification. License revoked. The words landed without drama, like a bus schedule. Helen lowered her gaze. Paul stared ahead, hands fixed on his knees. Someone folded their fan sharply, and only then did it feel final. Helen sat at her kitchen table, dividing pills into a plastic organizer. A car wash flyer doubled as a fan in her hand. Outside, a neighbor parked a shiny car with working AC. Helen watched silently as the engine purred steady. The room was quiet. Across town, Paul lived in a roadside motel. Low ceiling, TV with 2 channels. He was prying at a soda machine that had eaten his $1. On the TV, the insurance company announced a rebrand. Outside their office building, a gust of wind tore a panel from a letter on the sign. It crashed onto the asphalt. In Paul's room, a desk fan spun hot air in circles, changing nothing.